Hello and welcome to Vikings Territory Breakdown. I'm Joe Oberle, senior writer at VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com, and I'm with Mark Craig, Vikings writer, NFL insider, Hall of Fame selector for Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. We're here to talk about the Vikings and NFL and anything else you guys want to talk about. You want to talk about the weather, Mark, huh? You want to talk about the weather? It's cold enough for you? Yeah, Cleveland.
A little bit.
Played 4 divisional games this weekend. Just before he got on, I read an article by one of your colleagues, Jim Suhan, who said they weren't quite what their the division game isn't what we wanted. You know, it was kind of interesting. As I was watching that game, I love a good weather game, you know, snow game. And after I was watching, I said, "Oh man, this snow has really, you know, it's causing fumbles, but it's causing so many." And the players can't grip the ball. It's like this is not very exciting as it used to be.
I come at it from probably the opposite angle. I mean, granted, whenever Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are dueling all the way down to the final tick of the last second, that's fun too. But I don't need my NFL to be hermetically sealed into there's no germs at all happening. I'd like a little bit of, making it a little extra hard. This is where, when we talk all season about getting home field advantage, it didn't play out in the wild card round, but in this round, Houston, although CJ Stroud went to Ohio State, he should know how to play in the cold weather, but CJ Stroud, looked like or sometimes some of those teams would come into Minnesota and have to play out in the elements. And,
right.
Now we have fake snow coming down, and while the Vikings are talking about being tough and the people of the North and all this, and you got little fake snow coming down and it's 80 degrees inside. I'm okay with there being a little bit of, little extra chaos involved with the weather and stuff like that.
Yes, I always welcome that and liked it. It's just that I just noticed for the first time that it really affected. It's a different game now. It is more of an arena game where, and people are slinging it and you want them to be able to grip the ball. CJ Stroud, I think his problems came. He started last week with 4 or 5 turnovers and then he got another 4 or 5 this game. So it's like something more going on with CJ Stroud than just the weather, I think. But I just noticed it. It dawned on me. I didn't mind it, but it's
I don't know.
There's so many few left, Mark. Aren't there so many few outdoor stadiums left?
Well, there won't be any. Maybe Green Bay in 50 years from now, but like Cleveland's they're going into a dome out by the airport and. They're eliminating. History's full of these games of where the elements played a role, and we've just gotten to the point where we just we got to play it in a television studio and have everything perfect. And to me, if you look back, when the Raiders and the Steelers, I just got done reading the Madden book and really enjoyed that. It was written by late Brian Burwell, who's wrote it a while ago, but. Talking about, and then you look at the clips of when the Raiders would go into Pittsburgh, there was one game where, and there's a famous clip of it rained so hard in that, AstroTurf that it was slippery and everything. And, the Raiders, the Steelers had a running type of team and that played their advantage. And there's a clip of where Terry Bradshaw slides 30 yards and he's spinning around on his back and, and then you throw in all the snow games and the Vikings. My goodness, the Vikings, I wasn't from here, but I loved watching the Vikings because of the elements and those four guys walking up to the line of scrimmage and the cloud of smoke or steam. The NFL needs some of that, I think.
I agree with you. I'm just saying for the first time in my life, watching all those games you just described and loving it, it occurred to me that this is not as smooth. When you get to that many turnovers, it kind of throws the game off a little bit. But
that was also just poor play.
That really was.
Yeah, just really horrendous. They're better than that.
Well, let's run down the games. First, we got the Broncos beat the Bills, but Bo breaks his ankle. That's a tough blow for them. And it's too bad for Nix in his second year leading his team to the AFC Championship game. Or AFC, that's not even what you call it, the AFC.
Divisional.
Well, he leads them. He led them to the
yeah
championship game, and now the second to last play of the game, he breaks his ankle. What the heck? That's really too bad. What'd you think of that game?
That guy. I mean, obviously, Sean. You can see what Sean Payton saw in him, and what everybody else maybe thought about or didn't take a chance on. This guy's not going to have the numbers. I mean, he's like in the 20s in passer rating. He's not going to have all the stats or anything, but they're just big moment guys, and he's a big moment guy. That touchdown that he dropped in the front corner of the end zone to go ahead, against Josh Allen was just a thing of beauty. And I don't know what his numbers were, but yeah, it's a shame that that's the biggest shame. That I don't care about the weather and stuff. The biggest shame is that Bo Nix. If you people want to see Patrick Mahomes, I would like to have seen Bo Nix in his first AFC Championship game. Not, that's what I'm lamenting.
Yeah,
is that this guy? I love it. I love the story. In one of the best opportunities for teams to get quarterbacks, he's the sixth one in 12 picks. 5 go before him, and he's that guy. And I really like. It reminds me of Baker Mayfield and just a gritty guy. And it's a shame. I mean, the fact that he finished, and there's clips where it looks like his ankle's broken, and he's still finishing out the game, a couple plays and everything. If you think about like how fine a line it is in the NFL, the week 18, we see Baltimore miss a field goal that ends the career at that place of a coach that had been there for 18 years. They make that field goal. Maybe he keeps on. And then, Buffalo, there's that, once again, what's a catch, what's not a catch at the end of the game. He rolls over. It looks like he has possession. It's ruled that he's, it wasn't a catch. They lose the game and then Sean McDermott's out. And it's, wow. I mean, you talk about the openings in the league right now. It's 10 of them. At places, it's just amazing to think just how fine that line is anymore.
I want to go back to that play. I just don't understand how you replay that thing and not understand that the guy's got possession and he's on the ground and he's contacted. He's tackled right there. And then it keeps rolling. If you're going to tell me this is completion on the play, that he has to hang on to it because this guy can strip it, well, then anybody can come up to somebody on the ground and start pulling the ball away, even if they're down on the ground. It's a terrible review, terrible call, and it's terrible for the Bills and obviously Sean McDermott. My God, that his firing makes Kevin O'Connell now is on the longest tenured head coach in the league. What the heck?
I'm pretty sure it's 8th, but I don't know if he and McDermott came in. No, McDermott's been there longer than never mind. So yeah, O'Connell's like tied for 8th.
Yeah.
Sean McVay, I think he was still 39 in this game. I think he turns 40 this week. He's second. He's second in the league behind Andy Reid. A guy in his 30s. Goes back to Bum Phillips. There's them that's been hired and them that's been fired and them that's waiting to be fired. The clock starts ticking the minute that they introduce you, and it's the shelf life for a coach. I'm afraid will reach a point where 10 years will be considered like historic for the next generation.
And wasn't it didn't you say last week your voice is good for about 10 years, the coaches Bill Walsh said, or something like that?
Well, Bill Walsh said that. I think he was a 10-year, and John Madden, of course, and to this day still has the best winning percentage. He won 100 games in 10 years. Ulcers, basically, and in fear of flying, basically ran him out of football. I think he landed on his feet, though, as he had a couple other careers after coaching that made him a little bit of money.
Yeah, my grandkid was just downstairs playing Madden football in the basement this weekend. So yeah, he did all right after he left.
Yeah, and the fact that he didn't just lend his name to that, I mean, he built that. He instructed them on exactly how to do that. It was originally going to be a tape for high school coaches to learn how to coach, and it became what it is.
I was gonna say there's 10 openings, and we'll hit that in the next segment, talk about that because 2 of them already been hired by the sounds of it. So we'll get on that. But let's go to the next game. The Seahawks demolished the undermanned Niners, and I got to ask you, Mark, you changed your horse
Yeah.
stream. Is that because of the oblique? Is that what you saw that made you?
No, it was just when I was sitting down to do it for the paper, I was like, I just got this feeling, 49ers, that they're just a hard team to snuff out, and Christian McCaffrey they'll find a way. And boy, was I wrong on that one. Seattle's defense is just so good that it overshadows the fact that Sam Darnold right now isn't playing a whole heck of a lot better than he did at the end for the Vikings.
Yeah, it's really not. And, it certainly, straining your oblique muscle in practice, a few days before a divisional playoff game is not ideal. But, he looks similar in that regard. I mean, but he's got more chances to play. They won the game. They killed him. It was a little bit surprising. But the Sam Darnold story, I'm just curious how fans feel about it because, some people are really cheering for him, to go on. And there are some people are saying, they don't want him to win because, he should be here or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. Should there be any regrets by Vikings and Vikings fans that they don't have Sam Darnold?
There's just so much more involved. If it's just, Sam Darnold and, it's a salary cap league, and you just have to weigh that. You can't just weigh, would they like Sam Darnold to have played another year at the price where they could fit it all together? Yeah, they would have probably done it. And JJ's career would have been pushed back a year, but that's just not the reality of the NFL now. And, hindsight,
Yeah.
I mean, whenever he picked Seattle, I'm sure the Vikings probably, because Seattle was a 10-win team. Seattle had a lot going for it defensively, protection wise, certainly the skill players, talent wise, even though they got rid of, the DK Metcalf, and they did some, they made a lot of changes. But, when Sam Darnold went there, his chances of succeeding, were a lot better than if he had said, "Hey, I'm going to go to Cleveland," or I'm going to go to, Tennessee or somewhere. It's sort of like, this is not when Tom Brady picked his next jump from New England. They were all they needed, and the only thing they needed was a quarterback that was better than Jameis Winston, a lot better, and didn't throw the ball away. And they had Tom Brady, and they won a Super Bowl in 1 year.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask this question, but I feel like I know the answer. Could he have done this in Minnesota? I don't think so. The Vikings did end up 9-8. They were half a game out of the playoffs. I think that gets lost a little bit on everything that's going on because they were eliminated so early. So to quote Common Man, they're the lousiest of the best and the best of the lousiest. Their record is the best record that didn't make the playoffs. So it's like they're number 18th. There goes their draft pick. So could he have done this in Minnesota? Do you think? Could he have taken a 9-8 team, as it turns out, to further in the playoffs?
Oh, sure. I mean, one of the biggest, and we'll get into this later, but one of the biggest differences between them and the 4 teams is health at quarterback. I think they would have made the playoffs if JJ McCarthy. They may not have gone far or won a game, but I think if he stays healthy and stays on his trajectory of getting a little bit better, getting more experienced, and not having gaps of like missing 5 games and then missing a couple games and then leaving games early and all that stuff, they win 10 games and they're right there. Sam definitely wilted in the big moment last year in Detroit against the Rams,
but there was a hand, there were other hands in what happened, primarily the protection. The Rams just ate up his protection, and Sam, instead of like carrying his protection, he just completely melted in the big moment and was sacked 9 times against the Rams. And the defense didn't play that great in that game either. Remember one of the things I was writing about was how the game opened, and Stafford, they were well rested. They basically said, we don't care who we play. We don't care what our seed is. We want to rest, go into the playoffs. And so that told me they weren't afraid of the Vikings or Sam Darnold. And they went right down the field offensively and scored on the Vikings. If the Vikings defense, and they're capable of it, played like Seattle did on Saturday or Sunday or whatever it was, then yeah, Sam Darnold could have, because Sam Darnold didn't do a whole heck of a lot in that game to say, Sam, it's a weird feeling because Sam Darnold may go to the Super Bowl, but Sam Darnold could be, riding sidecar to that defense, which he could have done here. And that's, I guess, where people will go, he could have done it here with, but I think you need to just factor in all of the, what went into to hitching your wagon to him longer term.
Yeah. Yeah. They wouldn't have had the exact same defense either. They probably would have had to, they wouldn't have been able to get all these players they got in if they got Sam at a big number. So who knows? It's question will never be answered, but you got to throw it out there. When I look at the playoffs, there's a couple of guys that will have veteran, at least one veteran quarterback is going to play in the Super Bowl, either Sam Darnold or Matthew Stafford. And on the other side, it's going to be some untried and untested quarterbacks in the final game, because the Patriots beat the turnover prone C.J. Stroud and the Texans, and just for 2 weeks in a row. I mean, we talked about this last week in the podcast. I wanted to take the Patriots, but I because I feared C.J. Stroud would play like if he played like last week when he had 4 turnovers. So he did it again. Now you can blame the weather or whatever, but goodness me, he looked like a scared kitten at times in that pocket back there, and I'm not sure why. I mean, he's been around. He's been in the playoffs the last 2 or 3 years, and I was just surprised at the way he performed in those 2 games when the Patriots beat them.
Yeah, I mean, the weather, the Patriots defense is, boy, they're playing so good, so well right now. He was seeing ghosts and feeling rain and cold, and it was not his but shining moment. But you got to look at this guy. This guy's, I think, in his 3rd year. He's won a playoff game each year, or he's been a part of a playoff win each year, which around Minnesota, you see these other teams like look at Sean McDermott getting fired, and he had won he had been to the divisional round like 6 straight years, had 5 division championships and all these wins, and to get to this point, out the door. It's not saying O'Connell. Each year that O'Connell is here and doesn't have a playoff win is closer to sitting on that hot seat. And then if you don't do something, that hot seat gets you out the door, so tick-tock, I guess, KO.
It's in the Texans, in regard to them, they had a great defense that a quarterback with some experience couldn't manage it. I mean, the Texans defense has been great the past 2 weekends in the playoffs, just great. And they made life hell for Drake May. Whereas Sam Darnold was enough, the defense was enough to get him to the next round. It wasn't here. I don't know if I have a question more than an observation there, but defense wins championships at this point. And all 4 remaining teams have pretty dang good defenses, right?
Yeah, and Houston has a championship caliber defense as well. That's a hard. The Vikings felt that. Granted, but the Vikings were different a little bit with their run defense not being as good as the remaining teams. But there were some days where the Vikings defense had to walk off the field going, there's nothing more we could do, to try and to win a game. So the defense wins champion.
the Houston with those two edge rushers, Daniil and Will Anderson, they got two guys that coming around the edge that have a really good ability to get the ball out. You know, Daniil did it. Anderson did it. And they have what they need. You know, I think CJ Stroud, you can't like throw him away. You know, you just got to, make that part of his evolution, and I think, and keep him as your quarterback. And, they're knocking on the door, and I think they just keep knocking on that door. I think they'll be good. But that's another coach that's ought to be looking around going, geez, he's teeters between coach of the year and, well, we've been here, 3-4 years in a row. You better do it next year or you're out.
Jeez, it's a terrible state of affairs. Final game was a doozy. The Rams outlast the Bears in overtime, and it had a finish for the ages. Caleb Williams nearly pulls off another miracle finish with that Hail Mary he threw up at the end. It was a great pass. It was on the spot, but there was a little bit of luck involved in that thing, as far as I can say. But that was a fun and entertaining game to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think I sent you the email about when he turned around and started running backwards on that fourth down. I was like, that's Fran Tarkenton. That's like a gigantic Fran Tarkenton, and he turns around and he just throws a dart. Wow. I mean, he's so much better than I thought he was going to be. I just kind of thought he was going to, I don't know. I still like the guy. The fact that he's been there, he's played every single game. He's shown up every single game. He's getting better. He never was a turnover guy. Now he's going to be known as throwing that turnover in overtime, throwing that interception. But, man, these things change so quickly, but I don't think the Bears are going anywhere because they finally, I believe, they got a quarterback that can be there for 10 years.
And they got a coach who can coach him. I think that really helped him this year. Coaching matters because there was a marked difference in Caleb's performance from last year to this year for sure. The Rams are who we thought they were. Mark picked them as his Super Bowl favorite, so he knew about the Rams. But the Bears were not who we thought they were. I thought they would never. I was doubting them all year, and I had to start paying attention when they beat the Eagles, and then they kept winning and kept winning and kept winning. And when it happens, eventually the cardiac kids are gonna have the cardiac arrest. It's gonna happen. And they kept winning in the fourth quarter. It was just amazing, and they almost did it again. But you can't keep going by that. But the problem is, like you just said, we got a decade ahead of us with the Vikings trying to figure out how to defend this guy and this team. They're going to be good. They, for me, are the face of the NFC North for the next while.
Well, yeah. I mean, Goff is still a young guy. They got to put an offensive line back around him. Jordan Love is, they can win with Jordan Love in Green Bay. And, the Vikings, if JJ can stay healthy, I mean, I've obviously been saying get a veteran in here that can take the job, but I've never once said move on from JJ because he is only 22 years old. If he can stay healthy, I think he can be right there with them. I mean, he's got something special about him, but he just cannot stay on the field. So I think the Vikings, they have a guy that could give them because. When we get to the next year, we always look back at the last year and go, here's how this year is going to go. And it's never that way. It just seems like it always changes. So we got to be open to what is going to be next year's, we didn't see that coming. And it could be JJ McCarthy playing every game and the Vikings getting back in the playoffs. It could be, the Lions going, making some tweaks up front and getting the coordinator situation and everything straight and them going back to where they were. We don't know.
When I look at the way the Vikings finished, and I know they did it with a decent defense and without, at best, uneven quarterback play and just, at times very bad quarterback play. They improved that and they strengthened a little place. They're right there. When they finish 9-8 with the kind of quarterback play they got this year, you have to be hopeful going forward, right? That they can figure out how to make AJ work.
And I think that that's why whenever they were out of it so early that I said it's important how they finish. And, not just for what we're saying, what you just said, imagine what if they'd have lost, if they were a 4-win team, what we'd be saying. But to me, it's not just what we're saying, because what we say doesn't matter. But some of that feeling that we're having, these are human beings in the locker room. They would be thinking the same thing. They'd be thinking it about their teammates. They'd be thinking it about their coaches. There would be a lot of doubt in their minds, and that has an impact. So I feel like the mood of the team is better, by winning those last five games than it would be if they'd lost those last 5 games.
Absolutely. That's a great point. On that, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with to talk about the Vikings and moving forward and the coaching carousel that is spinning like crazy. So come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Mark, so we got I kind of touched on. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what the Vikings are missing to get them over the hump and to the next level. I mean, when you look at the 4 remaining teams, they do have great defenses. We talked about that, and they have pretty decent quarterbacks, which is kind of a key. Are there other differences you see that these teams possess that we don't, and can they do anything about it?
Well, I mean, the similarities are. I mean, I wrote a story on this weekend. The similarities, one that really jumped out. A lot of them were defensive statistics, and it was, the top 2 seeds were 1-2, and I think it was Seattle first, Denver second, in third down defense, and the Vikings were third. Vikings were second to one of them, Denver in sacks. So sacks, pressures, third down, points. They're very similar. I mean, the Vikings had a defense that could be right there. Where they differed, and a receiver, I would say I put the Vikings targets and those skill guys up against what's left, better than Denver's. Where they're a little different is the biggest difference for me is health on the offensive line, health at quarterback. The Vikings were 32nd in third down offense, which means they just couldn't get anything done in those, as KO says, meaty downs. Well, the meaty downs a lot of times were being overseen by JJ, who's was hyper and and then missed a bunch of games, and an undrafted rookie free agent who shouldn't have been playing, and Carson Wentz, who just got off his couch and showed up and was thrown in there basically 2 weeks later. So that's probably the biggest difference in how you improve on that is, we just keep beating the drum, but it's stay healthy at quarterback, stay healthy on the offensive line. I think this team needs obviously they need a center. I mean, you can't go into the next season with Ryan Kelly. You need a center. You need JJ to stay healthy. And I as much as I like Aaron Jones and some of the stuff that Mason does, a big time running back would do wonders for this team.
Yeah, it'd be it's something they need. I worry about how they can remake this roster in the face of some serious cap issues. I think we were like the highest over the cap for this coming season, and it probably because they paid or they offered to pay a number of these pickups from last year's 2 years contracts and a lot of money. Do you see some of those guys getting whacked, like Javon Hargrave or someone like that, or anybody else that might be gone because they have to somehow make cap work?
Yeah, I mean, those 2 tackles were aging, obviously. You got to be able to replace them first. Allen came in, big money, and Hargrave, big money. Yeah, I mean, it's going to look different. You're obviously going to have to find a way to replace Harrison Smith, and it's going to look different. And then, what's probably really going to be the biggest hole. I mean, I'll take players over coaches any day, but whenever you're operating with a cap situation that's challenging, and you'd like to have a coordinator like Brian Flores putting it all together and seeing, he can see the Josh Metellises, he can see the Just some of the stuff he did with Jay Ward at the end of the year. He's able to visualize that and see it, put it together. It looks like they're going to lose that, and then you're starting over. So that's a big concern.
Are you saying that you think Flores is gone? I know we can jump up.
Well, Pittsburgh. We'll talk about it later, I guess.
We'll talk about it now because
Pittsburgh's bringing him in for an in-person interview today. I think he's already interviewed Zoom or whatever. Pittsburgh doesn't. They're not very experienced at hiring coaches. They've only done it. This is only the third time that they've done it. Well, they did it in 1969 for Chuck Noll. They did it in 1992 for Bill Cowher. They did it in 2007 for Tomlin, and now this. Whoever's going to get hired now is going to take them. I'm surprised they're going old. Someone over 40. It's because this guy's got to last another 20 years in Pittsburgh. So. I've always said that, owners want to make a big splash and owners are going away from defense into offense. Well, Pittsburgh, if they hire Flores, it'll be, the second time since that they've two coaches they've taken from the Vikings on a non-Vikings playoff team that were defensive guys. If that happens, if it happens. But he's ready, I think. And the other thing other tie he has to Pittsburgh is that when he was the pariah of the league and kind of like nobody wanted to touch him, Mike Tomlin reached out, brought him in as an assistant head coach and gave him a position coach too. He was there for a year, goes on to Minnesota after that. So they're comfortable with him enough. They like what they see, and we'll see.
10 openings this offseason for head coaches now with the firing of Sean McDermott, and a lot of huge names, tenured names that have gotten the axe and will obviously get hired somewhere else. Well, two of them already did. John Harbaugh is hired by the Giants and Kevin Stefanski hired by the Falcons. So that means 8 left. I just do feel the numbers are going to eventually catch up to the Vikings and Flores here, because that many openings, and he's got to be, if were it not for him being the pariah at the time he left Miami, he would have been, hired somewhere else as well. I mean, everybody talks about his defenses. Now, you've made the point here, and it's valid, that they go for offensive people to run your team and get a really good defensive coordinator in the house. But when you got someone like Flores who does have head coaching experience and has consistently put, whether the personnel's been there or not, has consistently put a good defense on the field, you got to believe that teams are they're going to hire him no matter what's going on outside the line.
Well, yeah, I think it will come, but there are a lot of other guys that are are in the mix, and Mike Tomlin, basically, from what I understand, taking some time off. That's another opening because if Tomlin wanted to go somewhere, I mean, if I was Baltimore, I'd probably hire Mike Tomlin. Would have done that, but that's another opportunity that's going to be there that Tomlin's not going to take. Apparently, it appears Bill Belichick is done, or he's not going to come back this year. So that's it's things you'd be thinking of, that defense and maybe Tomlin or Belichick, or there'd be all these musical chairs, people taking the chair, but it looks like I think there's going to be one for Tomlin or for Flores when the music stops.
Well, given that, you sent me over the notes this morning that the Packers and Giants are interviewing Durante Jones, who is, if the Vikings were to stay in-house if Flores leaves, he is the heir apparent. What do you see there, and what do you think will happen? Well, you're saying they're hoping if Flores goes, it goes soon enough so that they can get him.
Well, the first, I believe the Cowboys, were looking at him. And then I think the Packers and Giants are kind of in a little bit later. They're also in the running for him. So he would be the guy that, you have a guy who's on the rise. He's going to be a coordinator probably. This year it looks, or this in 2026, he's going to be a coordinator. If you lose Flores and you want to keep, that eye or someone who learned under Flores, both the X's and O's and just the sense of how you can move pieces and acquire pieces. Like, Van Ginkel's nobody really thought Van Ginkel was going to be that piece, or what they saw in Grenard. Grenard had some success, obviously, but things that Flores has done, the best way to try and keep that is someone who's trained under him, and Jones has trained under him.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'd hate to see Jones lead to the Cowboys, and then a day later, Flores goes to and a day later Flores goes to the Steelers. You lose two guys like that, but it happens all the time in the NFL.
I don't want to see anybody go on to the Cowboys. That's just me, though. The Vikings did move on from their offensive line coach, Chris Cooper. Is this because he has a new job or didn't do well in his old one? What are your thoughts there?
Well, he's not responsible for the injuries. I've always thought that the Vikings, and I don't know if it's Chris's fault or it might even go back farther than Chris. It just seems like over the years the Vikings have, and granted they have not had the best guard play, the best center play. And then there was a long stretch where when they did have a center or maybe a guard, the tackles were, Spielman took forever to find the tackles, found them, and then got fired. I always felt that, it was pretty easy to fool the Vikings with stunts and games and stuff. And it just seemed like they didn't move like the good offenses do whenever, if someone loops around, the Vikings were always like, well, like they'd never, whoa, where'd you come from? It was always just seemed to be that way. And the Vikings obviously think they can do better at offensive line. And so
some of the other names, Eric Bieniemy is going back to the Chiefs as their offensive coordinator. Drew Petzing is the new OC in Detroit, and Michael Hutchins. Isn't that a guy name from NXS? Michael Hutchins to the DC job at Cal. So
he was their safeties coach. So
okay.
Probably a little less news than Harrison Smith probably retiring. But
what do you got there, Harrison Smith?
Harrison's. I mean,
he hasn't announced.
Harrison Smith. If 14 years of being around that guy tells me anything, Harrison Smith would not do what he did on that final day, and be taken out of the game and go through all of that and come back. But if he does, I'm not going to hold it against him. But I just sensed that he's done. It has to end at some point, and it's over, I think.
Seems like he did want to come back because he liked Flores, and Flores felt the same about him. So maybe they're both on the way out. Whether we'll find that out in coming days. And for the moment, we're going to be out. We're going to go take a quick break, and we'll come back and finish up on what's going to happen next weekend. Come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig. Mark, 2 games, exciting games coming up this weekend. It's not I'm not getting the New England Patriots are back in there, which is a name we've known in the AFC championships for a long time. It's nice to see the Rams are kind of a new name. They've got a recent Super Bowl victory. The Broncos have been cold for a while, and Seattle hasn't been back. So some new names in there. It's kind of exciting, these Final Four for the NFL here.
Yeah, the Patriots should have changed their uniforms or something to give us obviously it's an entirely new situation, but it's like seeing that uniform, like they never left.
Right.
It's also kind of I like that the Patriots, I like that Vrabel's doing what he's doing right now, because Vrabel was coach of the year, then Vrabel was on the hot seat, then he got fired, and the team that fired him was the first one of these 10 teams to change coaches. So it's like, if you had just a little bit of patience, or if you could just find a way to, maintain some patience. Now, Pittsburgh, different story. Tomlin, on his own, chose to leave, but he felt it was time, but yeah, it's, that obviously some of the shine's taken off of that game because, you won't have Bo Nix. I mean, to me, it would have been so cool to see Bo Nix, the two of the second year quarterbacks, not the first one, but the second one, Drake May, taken, Bo Nix the last one, but now you got Stidham, who's is a former Patriot. He was drafted by the Patriots, but and then the other one, you have the extremes. You got the two second-year guys that are in their early 20s, and you got Matthew Stafford, who's probably he's gonna break the record by days or months of Rich Gannon winning his first MVP when he was 37.
Mm.
Stafford's going to be 37, and I think some days older. So there's a lot of fun things to watch at the quarterback position, and I don't think there's ever been a time where there's been more quality, elite quarterbacks in the league.
Did you intimated a couple things, or you said Coach of the Year and MVP? Is that who you voted for on those two guys that you mentioned, Vrabel and Stafford, in those positions?
Well, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
But yeah, and then you'd have to kill everybody that's listening. So that's probably
yeah. I mean, there were a lot of good candidates for Coach of the Year. Kyle Shanahan being one of them, but it's just based on the regular season. But man, there were a lot of It's weird in a year when so many guys got fired that there were a lot of Coach of the Year candidates.
It is. It's interesting. I mean, feast or famine, I guess, in the NFL in the coaching ranks, and somewhere the reigning Coach of the Year is scratching his head and figuring out what to do next. And Kevin O'Connell, do you? I don't think he's close to the hot seat yet or anything like that. Do you think? Is next year a big year where he's got to do something more, get in the playoffs and win the game, or else he's going to start talking about it?
If you look around the league, the sense of urgency is there. The Wilfs are very patient. They're patient owners. I mean, nobody's as patient and makes as many good moves as the Steelers when it comes to, just having not listening to the outside noise. I mean, I think the Vikings are good. Zim, I love Zim, love Spielman, but they were given ample time and they didn't do it, so they had to make a change there. If he goes another year, doesn't make the playoffs, I mean, it's never good to miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. Zim found out. Zim was kept, when he was down, he'd be back up. Down, well, whenever he got to where he was down 2 years in a row, he was out the door. I wouldn't say that O'Connell gets fired if they don't make the playoffs, but there better be some good extenuating circumstances, and there better be some acceptance on his part that if he did miss the playoffs again, he would be on a hot seat. Yes.
Yeah, for my money, the warmest seat over at TCO is Quasey's, but that's a discussion for another time. I hope he can cool it off with a great draft this spring. So looking at the game ahead, we have which one you want to do first? New England at Broncos, that's 1 versus 2, or the Rams and Seahawks, which is 1 versus 6, I think 5. I think the Rams were 5 in the playoff seeding originally when they started. Which one you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's do the AFC. I mean, it's asterisk with the 1 versus 2, but Denver's. I mean, this is as the old Clevelander in me. Denver's a hard place to hang on to the ball when you get near the goal line, or you'll have a fumble that you'll be dealing with for the rest of your life. If the score is, if you come charging back and you're getting ready to go in for the winning score, you better hang on to the ball, or you'll be Ernest Biner. Will be in your head the rest of your life. The home field advantage is great. Home field advantage is great, but I like New England's defense to travel well. I like Drake May to be able to piece it together and win that game.
What kind of game do you think? I mean, they have 2 really good defenses. You got one quarterback who's had a great year, and the other one who is a total wild card. I don't remember the last time he's even played or whatever. But you're looking at a low scoring game with those defenses, and Drake May still only in his second year. Texans showed that you get a good defense on it, can make it tough for him.
Yeah, I mean, like last week with the Bears and the Rams, it went exactly how I thought it would be. I think the Bears thought it'd be a close game. I thought there'd be more points, but the weather, I thought it would be a close game. I thought the Bears would prove themselves, but then it would be, this veteran's a little bit better. The quarterback's gonna win in the end, and that's kind of how it happened. This one, I do see low scoring because the two defenses there's a lot of pressure. I think Denver, there's nobody that brings pressure like Denver. So, if they're going to go to the Super Bowl, their defense has got to carry them there. And in a way, not more than just a way, their last Super Bowl, when they won Super Bowl 50, I mean, it was Peyton Manning's last game and he won the Super Bowl, but that defense carried an old broken down Peyton Manning into that. Peyton didn't play every game that year. He was hurt. Right. So yeah, it's got to be defense. I think it'll be low scoring, but I think that the pressure that New England puts on Stidham is going to be a bigger deal than the pressure that Denver puts on May. So I'm going to go with a low scoring, close win by the Patriots.
Okay, just for some context, we once again remain tied. I got the Seahawks Niners game right because Mark switched after he did some closer examination to the Niners. Yeah. Got that one. And then I lost the Patriots Texans game, which, save for CJ Stroud, should have been mine as well. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So we're still tied. We both were 2-2, which is not great out of 4 games, but here we are. I got to go with the Patriots. I mean, you lose your quarterback the second to last play of the game. It's a physical loss, but it's also an emotional loss. He's probably their team leader. He's, all of a sudden Stidham's got to. You're just that bit of confidence might wane a little bit for the Broncos, and the timing and the chemistry and everything else is going to be tough for him to just turn it around and go back. So the way the Patriots are on a roll, and to see that, I totally agree that they should have changed their jerseys. I don't like seeing the Patriots in there again. But I don't want to see good old Sean Payton in there for Vikings Bobo, obvious reasons. So I'm going to go with the Patriots. We got the Rams at the Seahawks. And another big game that could go either way. Mark, how do you lay that one out?
I mean, I've been on the Rams. I mean, a lot of people have been on the Rams. It's not like I went, oh, yeah, I'm going to pick this dark horse. I mean, Rams were kind of a popular pick. I like Stafford where he's at, and I like their defense. I just love the fact that, what the Rams have done. I mean, when they thought the draft was meaningless, they went out and bought themselves a Super Bowl with trades and free agency. And then when it got to where that was unsustainable in a cap situation, they went to the draft and they drafted great defensive linemen. 2 guys that came in who were, fantastic defensive linemen. The year after that, Aaron Donald, who's, walks into the Hall of Fame 0.0001 second after he's eligible. They built themselves a great defense. I just like Seattle's going to be a hard place to win. Darnold, to me, it's kind of, we're talking about, what will Darnold, he'll be the storyline for nationally in Minnesota, but I don't know how much of an impact if he throws the game away, he'll have an impact, but I don't see Sam Darnold like putting that team on his shoulders and taking them to the Super Bowl. So he'll be along for the ride. I just like the Rams with Stafford and the defense as opposed to Seattle's defense and Darnold. So Rams.
2
road wins.
Yeah, as much as I'd like to disagree with you, I can't. I came in looking at Rams, and even though the Seattle defense to me looks tougher than the Rams defense, although they got to play against a better quarterback in Matthew Stafford than Sam Darnold, especially if his oblique is lingering. I don't know how long those things take.
You're going to make it boring?
Yep, I am going to bring it down to the last game.
If we tie that, we have to bet on the Pro Bowl or what?
We may have to. We'll make sure that we'll with Los Angeles and Patriots in the oh God, I don't want to have to pick the Patriots because I know you're going to pick the Rams. You got to stay with your preseason pick. Okay. Well, we'd have no idea.
Well, now it's going to be Denver against Seattle. So
yeah. Well, last week I switched one up for you. So you want to switch one of yours up this week? No,
I'm not. I'm going to stick with Patriots.
Well, there you go. Then we'll go with boring. Yeah, I'm going to take the Rams in that one. I just think the experience at this point. They got a good defense and their receivers are excellent. So they're going to be able to score points against the Seahawks defense. But they haven't done it in convincing fashion. They just win the Rams. So far in the playoffs, they haven't blown anybody out and. It's certainly not going to happen this weekend. So I'm just hoping for 2 more really good games. We'll see what happens. So, any parting thoughts, Mark?
No, that's it. I think I would like to have seen the Bills make it. They would have been closer to that Super Bowl. But Sean McDermott probably wishes they had won too.
Yes. I was pulling for them too myself. But they're cursed franchise, just like the Vikings and Cleveland and the Bills. Three cursed franchises. What are you going to do? But I by the way, I played the Factory of Sadness for some of my family here this weekend, just to as you know
Kevin Stefanski hired 12 days after he's fired in Cleveland. So next year Atlanta probably wins the Super Bowl.
Wow, there it is. All right, on that note, we'll be back next week to predict. Well, I won't predict, but we'll start previewing what's going to happen in the Super Bowl, and we'll review these picks and everything else that's going on. Things going to start happening as everybody gets together for the Super Bowl. Maybe there'll be some news coming out, so come on back and check us out at that time. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mike Woldham. Thanks, Joe Johnson, and thanks to everybody for checking us out. We'll see you next week and talk about it then. Until Skol.
Goal.